Tehran is speaking out this morning on the status of negotiations to end the war. The country's foreign ministry spokesperson said a degree of understanding has been reached with the United States on many issues, but added that signing an agreement is not imminent. The official added the focus of the negotiation is on ending the war, and at this stage, there is no discussion about nuclear details. This comes as President Trump is also now playing down hopes of an imminent breakthrough with Iran amid real bipartisan backlash to the reported proposal. Regional officials tell the AP the plan includes ending the war, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and seeing Iran give up its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, with those details and timelines to be worked out during a later 60-day window. With us, we have MS Now White House reporter Akayla Gardner and decorated combat veteran and former commander of U.S. Army Europe, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He is also an MS Now military analyst. And we'll get to both of them in just a moment. But first, let's bring in MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid live from Dubai. Inzamam, what's the latest you're hearing on the ground there? About 48 hours ago, the chatter was that a deal was in fact imminent. Now all parties involved seem to be tapping the brakes a little bit. What sort of progress has been made? What sort of issues remain outstanding?
Yeah, there was a lot of optimism over the weekend, wasn't there, Jonathan, around whether this deal, this framework would be signed off in order for the two sides to then get and meet face to face and have the negotiations, thrash out all those details in order to bring a conclusive ending to this conflict. But now we clearly are in a position where the Iranians are saying that a deal is not imminent. President Trump is saying, take your time. We've got plenty of time. We don't want to make any mistakes. And now we're in a situation where it seems maybe there is a sticking point where the two sides just simply aren't agreeing on in this framework. And we don't know what that is, whether that is down to the Strait of Hormuz, whether that's down to Iran's nuclear program. There are still huge question marks over what is the sticking point, what is the issue that the two sides aren't agreeing to. Now, the latest is that Iran is still working diplomatically to try and meet in the middle, to try and get their, concessions in some way, and also try and push the US to meet them as well. And we know that because Iran has sent a delegation to Qatar, where they are having conversations directly with the Qataris today. And that will be very important because that will be specifically around some of the points inside this framework. And also, we've heard, as you mentioned earlier, from the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Esmail Baghaei, where he had spoken earlier to State TV. And he said that we've reached a conclusion on a large part of the issues under discussion. The focus of the negotiations is on ending the war, and at this stage we are not discussing nuclear details. He also said that we are not collecting tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran and Oman are drafting a protocol for the safe passage of ships. It is natural that this is in process. The services provided and the protection of the area requires the collection of fees. That was a big red line for the US. You can't have these tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. That's just something that will not be allowed. Iran can't have any control of that waterway. They've said all along now that in the future they want to have control of the waterway. So that may be a potential issue as well. I think right now it is a wait and see situation. We are just waiting to see what Iran comes back with, whether there are changes to their position, whether the US creates any changes to their position. But finally, I just want to make one point, Jonathan, is that this is just the framework. This just allows the two countries to get into the room together, to have discussions over a 30 to 60-day period around all the other bigger issues, which will need to go into nitty-gritty detail. So whilst this may be signed in the coming days, it doesn't mean that the war completely stops, that everything goes back to normal, that the Strait of Hormuz opens up, that all the fighting in Lebanon completely ends. All it means is that the two sides will have a lot of discussing to do to bring a conclusive ending to this conflict.
Now, that's a great point, to be sure. And even if the uranium issue is set aside for a time, the fate of the Strait of Hormuz is what needs to be dealt with immediately. And if there's a difference there, then we may be nowhere at all in terms of an agreement. Inzamam, I wanted to get your take on something President Trump just posted to Truth Social a few minutes ago. It's a very long post, which I will not read all of, about the negotiations. But in it, he makes a demand of Gulf countries to join the Abraham Accords. Those watching probably remember it was a first-term Trump initiative, greeted with some acclaim for some nations to normalize relations with Israel and the like. A handful of countries joined, including the UAE, where you are. They're already on board. But now Trump is saying that other nations that are potentially part of the regional negotiations there, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, they also must be part of the Abraham Accords. He's making it this peace deal with Iran, these talks, as part of that. He's insisting that these countries join the Abraham Accords, sort of an out of nowhere 11th hour curveball that he says he floated over the weekend to some of the various leaders. What's your just sort of reaction to that? Have you heard any response, or even if not, just what do you think? Do these countries, are they going to be willing to do that?
No, that's not going to happen. I can't see in any way, shape or form the UAE and Saudi Arabia being part of one group. For example, two countries that are at loggerheads already, the UAE and Pakistan, not seeing eye to eye currently as well. The Gulf is very, very fractured as it is. And I think this war has made it even more fractured as a result. The Abraham Accords as it is right now is very, very strong. The UAE relationship with Israel has strengthened to levels that is never seen before. The UAE relationship with the United States is at an all-time high as well. And so the Abraham Accords, as they currently sit, are in a very, very good position, particularly for those countries. But bringing in other Gulf nations, I just don't see any Gulf nation wanting to be a part of it, particularly those who are pretty against what Israel and the US has done throughout this conflict. Yes, there may be benefit when it comes to trade, and that's obviously been a positive sign for this current Abraham Accord deal, but I just don't see it happening in any way. And I actually think we'll probably see some rebuttal, some refuting from some of the Gulf countries in the coming days to this notion that President Trump is trying to force them, I guess, into making a new Abraham Accords deal.
And maybe this will be something that Trump throws out there and then forgets about in the next couple of days, and he'll just toss it aside. But if he insists upon this, I agree. It will be major sticking points and significant complication here at the 11th hour. MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid, live from Dubai. Thank you, as always. We really appreciate it. Now, the Wall Street Journal editorial board is writing about the negotiations and asking the question, will Trump bail out Iran's regime? The piece reads in part this way. The basic problem lies with ending U.S. pressure before dismantling the nuclear program. If the blockade ends and Iran can sell its oil, all that's left to coerce it into nuclear concessions is the threat of renewed war. But Mr. Trump wasn't willing to do that after Iran reneged on reopening the Strait of Hormuz and attacked U.S. forces and Gulf allies. How credible will the threat be 60 days closer to the midterms when it would trigger a new Iranian blockade of Hormuz? A pledge not to build a nuclear weapon means nothing because the regime has always said that while doing the opposite. The regime only has to wait out the Trump administration to gain a freer hand. Iran's history is to drag out negotiations, and this preliminary deal is no doubt part of that strategy. Reopening the strait will reduce oil prices, but in the president's reluctance to do so by force, he has signaled that Iran holds the trump card. Even if successful, the deal would leave that card intact and looming.